I want you to picture a scenario. It's a Tuesday morning, you're rushing to work, maybe you're late for a meeting that could, determine your promotion.
Okay.
You've got a coffee in one hand, your phone in the other, and your mind is it's racing. And as you round the corner, you see a man slumped in a doorway. He's coughing, he looks bad.
Okay. I can picture it.
Do you stop?
Me? I mean, I'd like to say yes. Of course, yes. I consider myself a decent person.
Right. You, the person, are kind. You donate to charity, you help your friends move apartments. But in this specific moment, statistical probability says you keep walking. Why? Is it because you suddenly became a bad person between your front door and the subway?
No.
Or is it because 3 other people walked past him right before you and you unconsciously decided, well, if they didn't stop, it must not be an emergency?
And that is the terrifying question, isn't it? It is the difference between who we think we are, the protagonist of our own moral movie, and who we actually become when the context just shifts.
And that is exactly where we are living today.
Welcome back to the deep dive.
Yeah.
We are unpacking what might be the most uncomfortable book on my shelf. We're talking about The Social Animal by Elliot Aronson.
Uncomfortable is definitely the right word. I think shattering also works. This isn't just a psychology textbook. It is a mirror. And a lot of people do not like what they see in it.
A massive text, right. It's been updated, a dozen times?
Since the early 1970s, yeah. It effectively aggregates 50 years of social psychologists trying to figure out why humans who, claim to be rational act so irrationally the moment you put them in a group.
So the mission today is pretty high stakes. We aren't just reciting experiments from a textbook. I want to understand mechanically how I can be a good person 1 minute and a sheep the next. We are going to look at the invisible forces, authority, group pressure, norms that steer our lives often without us even touching the wheel. And we are definitely going to cover the big 3 experiments, of course, Asch, Milgram, Zimbardo. But we have to go beyond the Wikipedia summary. We need to look at the specific psychological triggers that make those experiments work.
Right.
We'll talk about why you buy things you don't need, why you stay in relationships that make you miserable, and maybe the most fascinating part, why smart people join cults.
And we are definitely going to spend a good chunk of time on cognitive dissonance, which I think is just the most mind-bending concept in the whole book.
It is the engine of self-justification.
Hey.
It explains everything from political polarization to why things like hazing even exist.
But let's start with the core thesis, the big idea, situation over personality. Because I think most people walking around today have a very firm narrative about themselves. I am an independent thinker. I have a strong moral compass.
Oh, absolutely. That is the narrative we all construct for ourselves. It's a protective mechanism. We like to think character is destiny. But Aronson comes along and argues that, no, the situation is destiny.
This brings us to a term that I see thrown around a lot, but I want to make sure we nail it down. The fundamental attribution error.
Right. This is the bedrock of social psychology. The fundamental attribution error is our tendency to explain a person's behavior by pointing to their internal character traits while, completely underestimating the power of the situation they're in.
Give me a concrete example.
Okay. So imagine you're driving, you are in the fast lane, cruising along, and suddenly a car comes up right behind you, rides your bumper, flashes its lights, and then swerves around you, cutting you off. What is your immediate reaction?
That guy's a jerk. He's a reckless idiot. He's aggressive. A bad person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You attribute the action entirely to his personality. He's a bad driver. He is a jerk. You don't think maybe he is rushing his pregnant wife to the hospital, or maybe his child just fell down the stairs and he's panicking?
No, of course not.
You go straight to character.
But if I cut someone off...
well, that's different, isn't it?
Right. If I do it, it's because I'm late for a flight and the TSA line is going to be huge. Or maybe the sun was in my eyes. It was situational.
Precisely. You judge yourself by your situation, but you judge others by their character. Aronson's book is essentially a massive compilation of evidence showing that the situation is doing the heavy lifting for almost everyone, almost all the time. He really challenges this core narrative that bad things are done primarily by bad people.
This is the part that unsettles me, because if you accept that good people can do terrible things given the right or wrong context, the world becomes a much shakier place. It suggests our morality is, fragile.
Fragile is the perfect word. And Aronson doesn't just philosophize about this. The book is built on what I like to call the big 3 experiments. These are the pillars of social psychology that prove this thesis. And I really want to get into the weeds on these because the details matter so much.
Okay, so let's start with Asch. Solomon Asch. This is the one with the lines on the card, right?
Yes. The conformity experiments from the 1950s. Now, visualize the room. You walk in to participate in what you think is a perceptual study. There are 7 other young men sitting in a semicircle. You sit in the second to last seat.
Why second to last? Is that important?
It's critical because you need to hear almost everyone else's answer before you give yours. That's the trap. You don't know that everyone else is an actor, a confederate, working for the experimenter. You are the only real subject.
So I'm sitting there thinking I'm just taking a simple vision test with a bunch of other guys.
Exactly. The experimenter holds up a large card with a single vertical line on it. He calls it the target line. Then he holds up another card with 3 comparison lines labeled A, B, and C. Your job is just to say which of the 3 lines matches the target line. And it's incredibly obvious, like a 5-year-old could do it without any trouble.
So line A is clearly the answer. There's no ambiguity.
None at all. And for the first couple of rounds, everything is normal. The experimenter holds up the cards, and the first person says line A. The second says line A. Everyone says line A. It's boring. You're relaxed. You're thinking, this is the easiest $5 I'll ever make.
Right.
But then on the critical round, the experimenter holds up the cards. Let's say line B is the clear match this time. Unmistakable. The first person, the actor, leans forward, squints a little, and confidently says line A.
Okay, at that point, I probably think he just wasn't paying attention, or he needs glasses.
A simple mistake. Then the second person says line A. The third person says line A.
Okay, now I'm starting to sweat. My heart rate is going up. I'm looking at the card again, thinking, am I crazy?
And that's the feeling. By the time it gets to you, 6 people in a row have confidently given the wrong answer. You are looking at the lines. Your eyes are screaming B, but your ears are hearing a chorus of A. Asch wanted to see. Would people trust their own eyes, or would they conform to the unanimous but incorrect group?
I feel like I would stand up and say, are you guys blind? It's B.
That is what we all think. That's what almost every single person predicts they would do. But the results, they were staggering. About 3/4 of the participants conformed to the wrong answer at least once.
75%.
At least once, yes. And across all the critical trials, people caved in and gave the wrong answer about 35% of the time.
35% doesn't sound like a majority, though. It sounds like most of the time they stood their ground.
But think about what that 35% means. It means that 1 out of every 3 times you were willing to deny physical reality, the evidence of your own senses, just to fit in with a group of complete strangers you will never see again. There was no penalty for being right. No one was pointing a gun at them. It was just the sheer visceral pressure of being the odd one out.
And Aronson points out that this was just for lines on a card. Imagine if it's a vague political opinion or a business decision where there's actual social currency at stake. The pressure must be 100 times worse.
That is the profound implication. If we crumble over something as trivial as the length of a line, how can we possibly expect to stand up against a powerful mob mentality on complex moral issues? But here's the interesting nuance Aronson adds, a little glimmer of hope. If just one other person in the group gives the correct answer before you, the spell is broken.
Really? Just one ally is all it takes.
Just one. If you have one partner in dissent, conformity drops from that 35% to nearly 0. It shows that we don't necessarily need to be in the majority. We just need to not be utterly alone.
That is actually hopeful. It means one brave person can liberate the rest of the room.
It does. It really does. But if Asch showed us that we are sheep, well, the next experiment showed us something much, much darker. We have to talk about Milgram.
This is the one that always makes me feel physically sick. The shock experiment.
Stanley Milgram's obedience studies, arguably the most famous and certainly the most controversial experiment in the history of psychology.
Let's get deep into the weeds of Milgram, because everyone knows the headline. People shocked the guy because the man in the lab coat said so. But when you read Aronson's breakdown, the devil is in the details. It wasn't just do it, okay? It was a psychological war going on in that room.
It absolutely was. And we need to talk about the setup and what Milgram called the prods.
Okay, so set the scene for me.
It's the early 1960s at Yale University. You've answered an ad in the newspaper to participate in a study on memory and learning. You show up and you meet another participant. A nice, kind of pleasant middle-aged man. He looks a bit soft, maybe a bit nervous. He says he's an accountant.
But the drawing was rigged, right? The other guy is always an actor.
100% rigged. The experimenter has you both draw slips of paper to assign roles. One says teacher, the other says learner. Your slip says teacher, the accountant says learner. The learner is taken into an adjacent room and strapped into a chair with electrodes on his wrists. You are there. You see them applying the paste to his skin to prevent burns. You, the teacher, are then taken to your room with the shock generator. It's this imposing metal box. It has a row of 30 switches, each labeled with a voltage, starting at 15 volts, which is labeled slight shock, all the way up to 450 volts, which is labeled simply XX.
And my job is to read pairs of words over an intercom. If the learner gets the answer wrong, I have to shock him. And every single time he gets it wrong, I have to increase the voltage by 1 step.
Right, 15, 30, 45. It seems harmless at first, a little tingle. But as the voltage goes up, the actor in the other room starts to react according to a script. At 75 volts, he grunts. At 120 volts, he shouts that the shocks are becoming painful. At 150 volts, he screams, "Get me out of here. I refuse to go on. My heart is bothering me."
Okay, and this is where the prods come in. Because if I'm the subject and I hear a guy screaming about his heart, I turn to the experimenter, the guy in the gray lab coat standing next to me, and I say, "Hey, I think we should stop. This is not right."
And the experimenter doesn't pull a gun. He doesn't yell. He uses prod 1. He says calmly, almost robotically, "Please continue."
That's it. Please continue.
That's it. If you refuse again, he moves to prod 2. The experiment requires that you continue. It frames it as a duty, a necessity greater than yourself. It's not about you or him anymore. It's about the experiment.
Okay, but at this point, the guy in the other room is screaming about his heart condition. If I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, forget your experiment. This guy could be dying.
You say that, and many subjects did. They would protest, they would sweat, they would bite their nails, but then comes prod 3. It is absolutely essential that you continue. And finally, if you still resist, the final prod 4, you have no other choice, you must go on.
You have no other choice. That is the line that just chills me to the bone, because obviously you do have a choice. You can stand up and walk out of the room. The door isn't locked.
Physically, no, but psychologically, the door is locked. This brings us to a concept Aronson highlights called the agentic state.
Break that down for me.
It is a profound shift in self-perception. You stop seeing yourself as an autonomous person who is responsible for your actions. You start seeing yourself as an agent of someone else's will. The experimenter, the authority figure, says, "I am responsible for what happens." And you can almost see the physical tension leave the subject's body in the footage. They relax a little.
They offload the morality. It's not my fault anymore.
Precisely. I'm not hurting him. The experiment is hurting him. I'm just flipping a switch. Before he ran the experiment, Milgram asked a group of psychiatrists to predict how many people would go all the way to 450 volts, a potentially lethal shock.
Yeah.
They predicted less than 1%. They thought only the true sadists, the pathological fringe, would do it.
And the reality.
65%. 2/3 of ordinary people, teachers, barbers, engineers from New Haven, Connecticut, went all the way to the end. Even after the guy in the other room stopped screaming and went completely, ominously dead silent.
That is. It just reveals so much about our inability to defy authority. But Aronson notes there were variations of the experiment where obedience dropped significantly, right?
Yes, and this is crucial for the listener to understand. It shows how the situation can be tweaked. For example, if the experimental gave the orders over the phone from another room, obedience dropped to barely 20%. And interestingly, many of the subjects lied. They would tell the guy on the phone they were increasing the shock, but they were secretly just giving the lowest 15-volt shock over and over.
Wow. So they were still conforming to the authority by lying and pretending to obey, but they wouldn't commit the violence without the physical presence of the authority figure.
The physical presence is key. Distance matters. Proximity matters. In another variation, if the subject had to physically hold the victim's hand down on a shock plate, obedience dropped to 30%. It's much harder to harm someone when you're touching them. It's so much easier when you're just pushing a button in another room.
Which feels incredibly relevant to modern warfare. With drones or even just cyberbullying, it's easier to destroy someone from a distance.
Exactly. The situation of remoteness enables cruelty.
We have to hit the third one briefly before we move on to the mechanics of influence. The Stanford prison experiment, Zimbardo.
This one really brings it all together. It's not about group pressure or direct orders. It shows how the roles we play can define us. Philip Zimbardo set up a fake prison in the basement of the Stanford Psychology Building. He recruited healthy, normal, psychologically stable college students. He flipped a coin. Half became guards, half became prisoners.
And these were just regular students. They weren't aggressive. They weren't criminals. Just guys looking to make a few bucks over the summer.
Completely normal. But Zimbardo gave the guards' uniforms mirrored sunglasses, which is a key detail, to de-individuate them, so you couldn't see their eyes. And he gave them wood batons. The prisoners were arrested at their homes by real police, stripped, deloused, given a number to replace their name, and put in cells.
And it was supposed to last for 2 weeks.
It lasted 6 days. It had to be shut down because it spun so violently out of control. The guards became sadistic. They weren't told to be, but they improvised cruelty. They were humiliating the prisoners, forcing them to clean toilets with their bare hands, putting bags over their heads, making them do push-ups with guards stepping on their backs.
The prisoners.
The prisoners broke down emotionally. Some had crying fits. Others became totally passive, zombie-like in their obedience.
In 6 days.
In less than a week, their individual personalities were essentially erased and replaced by the roles they were assigned. One guard, who was actually a pacifist in his real life, became the most brutal one. He was nicknamed John Wayne. He later said he felt like he was just playing the part of a tough guard, but the prisoners didn't experience it as a play. They experienced it as torture.
So that's the evidence. Asch shows we cave to the group. Milgram shows we cave to authority. Zimbardo shows we cave to the role we're assigned. It really does make the concept of individual character feel incredibly fragile.
It is fragile, but understanding that fragility is the first step to strengthening it. If you know you are vulnerable to these forces, you can be on guard against them.
Okay, so let's unpack the mechanics of this. We've seen the what, now let's look at the why. Let's talk about conformity in more depth. Why do we do it? Is it just that we are cowards?
It is not about cowardice, it is about survival. Aronson breaks it down into 2 main drivers. The first is what social psychologists call normative social influence.
Which is what exactly?
It's the desire to be liked. It's that simple. We are social animals. In our evolutionary past, if you were kicked out of the tribe, you were dead. So we have a deep biological, almost primal drive to avoid rejection. We go along to get along.
This is the peer pressure element. Like, I'm at a dinner party and everyone starts bashing a movie that I actually really liked. I'm probably not going to stand up and say, actually, I thought the cinematography was brilliant and the themes were profound. I'm just going to nod and sip my wine.
Exactly. You don't want to be the deviant. You don't want to disrupt the social harmony. You want to maintain your status within the group. But there is a second type, and it's more subtle. Informational social influence.
And that is
the desire to be correct. When a situation is ambiguous or confusing, or we're in a crisis, we look to others to define reality for us. We operate on the assumption that the group knows better.
Okay. So if I'm in a foreign airport and I don't know where to go, and I see a large crowd walking confidently in one direction, I follow them, not because I want them to like me, but because I assume they know where the exit is.
Precisely. And this is where it gets tricky, and Aronson makes this distinction very clear. In the first case, the normative influence, you might conform outwardly, but internally disagree. You still like the movie, you just don't say so. That is called public compliance. But with informational influence, you often change your belief. You actually come to think the group is right. This is called private acceptance.
So you internalize the group's reality.
You do. The source material brings up the Abilene paradox at this point. This feels like a classic example of this confusion between public and private belief.
Oh, the Abilene paradox is fascinating. Walk us through that.
It's a story told by a management expert named Jerry Harvey. A family in Coleman, Texas is sitting on a porch on a hot summer day. It's blistering hot. The father-in-law says, "Hey, why don't we all get in the car and drive to Abilene for dinner?" Now that's a long, hot, dusty drive in a car with no air conditioning.
Sounds awful.
It is. The daughter thinks, "That sounds awful, but I don't want to disappoint Dad. He seems excited." So she says, "Sure, sounds great." The husband thinks, "I don't want to go, but if my wife and her father want to, I'll be a good sport." So he agrees. The mother agrees because everyone else seems to want to go.
So they all get in the car.
They drive for hours on this miserable trip to Abilene. The food at the cafeteria is bad. The drive back is even worse. They come back exhausted, sticky, and miserable. Finally, they get back on the porch and someone says, "That was a great trip, wasn't it?" And the daughter finally admits, "To be honest, I didn't actually want to go. I just went because I thought you all wanted to."
And then what?
Then the husband says, "I didn't want to go either. I was just trying to please you." And the father-in-law says, "Heck, I didn't want to go. I just suggested it because I thought you all were bored." They realize nobody wanted to go. They all did something they didn't want to do because they thought everyone else wanted to do it.
That is a perfect tragedy of conformity.
It is a massive failure of communication, driven by the fear of being the odd one out. And it happens in boardrooms and families every single day.
Okay, so that's conformity pressure from the group. Now let's talk about compliance. This feels a bit more, predatory. This is about actively getting someone to do what you want. This is the marketing and politics section.
Compliance is about direct requests. And Aronson highlights how incredibly subtle this can be. We often think we make our decisions based on a rational weighing of facts, but usually we're just responding to well-honed psychological triggers.
The outline mentions 3 specific techniques. Let's start with foot in the door.
This is a classic. The idea is to start with a very small request, something so small and reasonable that a person can't really say no to it. Once they've said yes to that small thing, they are statistically much more likely to say yes to a larger related request later on.
What's the example Aronson uses in the book?
He cites a famous study where researchers, posing as volunteers, went door to door in a neighborhood and asked homeowners to put a huge, ugly, poorly lettered sign in their front yard that said, "Drive carefully."
Okay, no way.
As you'd expect, most people said no. Only about 17% agreed. I wouldn't want a billboard on my lawn either.
Right.
But for another group of homeowners, they took a different approach. They first asked them to do something very small. Either sign a petition supporting safe driving, or put a tiny 3-inch sticker in their window that said, "Be a safe driver."
Oh.
Almost everyone agreed to that. It's a low-cost, easy thing to do.
Okay. And then what happened?
2 weeks later, a different volunteer came back to those same houses and asked about putting the big, ugly sign on their lawn. The people who had agreed to the small request first. Their compliance rate for the big sign shot up to 76%.
Wow. From 17% to 76%. Why? Is it just momentum?
It's deeper than momentum. It's a concept called self-perception theory. When you signed that petition or put that sticker in your window, you observed your own behavior. You unconsciously said to yourself, "I am the kind of person who cares about safe driving. I am a good, civic-minded citizen." When the big request came 2 weeks later, refusing it would conflict with this new identity you just built for yourself. You feel a powerful need to be consistent with who you now perceive yourself to be.
So the salesman gets you to agree to a test drive, not just to show you the car, but to get you to relabel yourself as a potential buyer.
Exactly. Do you care about the safety of your family? Yes. Do you want to have peace of mind? Yes. By the time they ask for the $5,000 security system, you're trapped by your own consistency.
Okay, what about the opposite? Door in the face.
This works on a completely different principle. The principle of reciprocal concessions. You start with a huge, unreasonable request. A request you know they will say no to.
Hey, would you be willing to volunteer 10 hours a week for the next 2 years at our youth center?
Right. The answer is almost certainly no way. Then you immediately follow up with, "Okay, I understand, but would you be willing to chaperone a single 2-hour trip to the zoo this Saturday?"
And because you back down from your huge request, I feel a social obligation to meet you halfway and say yes to the smaller one.
Exactly. 2 things are happening. First, the $50 or the 2 hours seems incredibly reasonable by comparison. That's the contrast effect. But more importantly, because I made a concession by lowering my request, you feel a powerful social pressure to make a concession of your own by saying yes. It's a negotiation instinct that's hardwired into us.
I see this with my kids all the time. Can I stay up until midnight? No. Okay. Can I just have 10 more minutes? Fine.
They are natural social psychologists. They are playing you, and it's working.
I know, and I let them. Okay, the third one. The lowball technique. This one I think is the most painful because it feels like a betrayal.
It is very effective and very manipulative. The tactic is to get a commitment from someone at a low cost. Then, once they are psychologically committed, you raise the cost by revealing hidden fees or changing the terms.
The car dealership special.
The classic example. You agree to buy a car for $25,000. It's a great price. You're excited. You shake hands. You start mentally driving it home. You're thinking about the color, the smell. You text your spouse. You fill out the initial forms. You have mentally bought the car.
Then what happens?
Then the salesperson comes back with a sad look on their face. "Oh, I'm so sorry. My manager wouldn't approve that price. There was a mistake in the system. The floor mats aren't included. The final price is actually $26,500.
And even though you have every right to walk away, most people don't.
Most people don't. You have already mentally committed. You've anticipated the pleasure of owning the car. The extra $1,500 seems like a small nuisance compared to the psychological pain of unbuying the car and having to start the whole process over again. If they had started at $26,500, you might have walked away. But because you were lowballed, you stay.
It's leveraging our desire for consistency again. We hate going back on our word, even if the terms of the deal have been changed out from under us.
You see it everywhere. Watch out for it in subscription services. Free trial. Then you enter your data, your credit card. Then you realize it's actually really hard to cancel. You're already in. You've made a commitment.
Okay, let's circle back to the dark stuff. Obedience. We talked about Milgram, but I want to understand the why a bit more. What are the specific factors that make obedience to authority so potent?
Aronson identifies a few key levers that authority figures use. One is the power of authority symbols.
The uniform.
The uniform, the title, the setting. In Milgram's study, the scientist wore a gray lab coat. The study was at Yale. These things confer legitimacy. When they reran the experiment in a rundown office building in Bridgeport with just a guy in regular clothes, obedience dropped significantly. We are conditioned from childhood to respect the badge, the white coat, the expensive suit.
It's a mental shortcut. We see the symbol and we assume competence and we stop thinking critically.
Correct. The second factor is the gradual escalation we talked about, the boiling frog phenomenon. Milgram didn't ask people to give a 450-volt shock immediately. That would be absurd. He started at 15, then 30, then 45.
It connects right back to the foot in the door technique.
Exactly. It's the same principle. If you administered 15 volts, why not 30? It's not that different. If you did 30, why not 45? At what point do you draw the line and say no more? There is no clear moral line in the sand. Each small step justifies the previous one and prepares you for the next one. By the time you are really hurting someone, you are already so deep in the process that stopping would mean having to admit that everything you did up to that point was wrong.
Which brings us perfectly to the next section, because admitting we are wrong is something human beings absolutely hate doing. Let's talk about cognitive dissonance.
This is, in my opinion, Aronson's most significant contribution to popularizing social psychology. He actually studied under Leon Festinger, who was the one who coined the term. Cognitive dissonance is that state of tension, that mental discomfort that occurs when a person holds two cognitions, ideas, attitudes, beliefs, that are psychologically inconsistent with each other.
Or when your behavior directly conflicts with your belief.
Exactly. The classic example. The cognition, I am a smart, healthy person, is in conflict with the behavior, I smoke 2 packs of cigarettes a day. That creates dissonance. It's uncomfortable. It's like a mental itch that you have to scratch.
So how do we scratch it? Aronson lists 3 main ways.
Right. First, you can change your behavior. You can quit smoking. That's the most logical and healthy way to resolve the dissonance. But it's also really hard.
So most people don't do that.
No. So they turn to the second option, change the conflicting belief. The research on smoking is inconclusive. Or my grandfather smoked until he was 90 and he was fine. You try to downplay the evidence.
Or the third option, rationalize the behavior by adding new cognitions.
Exactly. I need to smoke to manage my stress. If I didn't smoke, I'd be unbearable to be around. So actually, I'm smoking for my family's well-being.
The mental gymnastics are just incredible.
They are. And Aronson calls this whole process the engine of self-justification. He says we are not rational animals. We are rationalizing animals. Sure, we spend an immense amount of our mental energy just convincing ourselves that our past decisions were smart, our actions were moral, and our beliefs are correct.
We have to talk about the doomsday cult. You can't discuss cognitive dissonance without getting into the flying saucers.
The Seekers, yes. This is the foundational story. In the 1950s, Festinger and his students infiltrated a small cult in Chicago, led by a woman named Marion Keech.
So, for the listener who hasn't heard this story, Keech claims she's receiving telepathic messages from aliens on a planet called Clarion. The world is going to end on December 21st in a great flood.
A classic apocalyptic setup. But she says that there's a loophole. If you are a true believer and you prove your faith by selling your house, quitting your job, giving away your money, and sitting in her living room on the night of the 21st, the flying saucers will come and rescue you at midnight.
Now, you have to imagine the level of commitment here. These people have burned their bridges. They've been mocked by their friends and neighbors. They have given up everything. They are all sitting in that living room, waiting.
The clock strikes 12, no saucer.
12.05, silent.
12:30, 1:00 a.m. The dissonance in that room must have been deafening. They had 2 cognitions at war. Cognition A. I have sacrificed everything for this belief. Cognition B. The evidence of my senses says nothing is happening. They had 2 choices. Choice A. I am a complete idiot. I threw my life away for a crazy person.
Which is an incredibly painful thing to admit. It shatters your self-concept.
Or choice B. Find a new explanation that resolves the dissonance. And what happened?
Keech gets another message.
At 4 a.m., her hand starts writing. She receives a new transmission from the aliens. It says the small group's faith and light had so impressed God that he had called off the flood. They had saved the world.
That is just, it's genius.
It resolved the dissonance instantly. They weren't fools. They were heroes. We saved the world. And what was the very next thing they did? They went out and started calling newspapers and recruiting people on the street.
Because if you can convince someone else to believe it, it validates your own belief and quiets your own lingering doubts.
Exactly. Proselytizing is very often just a way to quiet our own internal dissonance. And Aronson draws a straight line from the Seekers to modern politics.
Oh, absolutely. When our guy loses an election or our guy gets caught in a scandal, we don't say, oh, I guess I was wrong about him.
Never. We say, the system is rigged, or the media is lying, or he's playing 4D chess, you just don't see it. We will twist reality into pretzels, rather than admit that our investment of time, emotion, and identity was a mistake. It is the sunk cost fallacy, driven by ego protection.
This also explains things like hazing, doesn't it? In fraternities, the military, even intense corporate retreats.
Absolutely. It's a concept called justification of effort. If I go through a brutal, humiliating, or painful initiation to join a group, and then the group turns out to be kind of boring and mediocre, the dissonance is huge. I suffered for this. I look like a fool. So I unconsciously distort my perception of the group. This is the greatest group ever. The brotherhood here is amazing.
You have to believe that to justify the pain you went through.
Exactly. Aronson discusses an experiment where women had to go through an initiation to join a discussion group. One group had a severe, embarrassing initiation. The other had a mild one. Then they all listened to the same recording of a really boring discussion. The women who went through the severe initiation rated the boring group as far more interesting and valuable.
They had to.
They had to justify their effort. If you walk into the club for free, you might critique it. But if you paid a high price to enter, whether in money, effort, or embarrassment, you will defend it to the death.
Now, Aronson doesn't just leave us in the darkness of obedience and dissonance. He does expand the scope to some broader emotional topics. Let's touch quickly on prejudice and aggression.
This is where the situational argument becomes really important for society as a whole. Aronson argues that aggression and prejudice are largely learned behaviors and situational outcomes, not just, innate human evil.
So we aren't born racist.
No, we learn it. And social systems create environments that either foster it or reduce it. The classic example is the Robbers Cave experiment. Researchers took a group of normal 11-year-old boys at a summer camp, separated them into two groups, the Eagles and the Rattlers, and then made them compete against each other in games for scarce resources, like prizes and recognition.
And they started hating each other almost immediately.
Instantly, it got ugly, fighting, name-calling, raiding each other's cabins. But then the researchers changed the situation. They created superordinate goals, problems that couldn't be solved by one group alone. Things like a broken water truck that supplied the whole camp, which required both groups to work together to fix.
And the prejudice just evaporated.
It did. The hostility melted away and they started making friends across group lines. It proves the contact hypothesis. When you are forced to cooperate and rely on someone to achieve a common goal, it is very hard to maintain your hatred for them. You change the incentives, you change the behavior.
Interestingly, the book also covers love and attraction. It's not just the dark side of human nature.
Right, but his take is less romantic than poets might like.
Yep.
He shows that attraction is heavily influenced by situational factors like proximity. We tend to love people we are physically near. And similarity. You love people who validate our own views and tastes. And, wait for it, the pratfall effect.
The pratfall effect, what's that?
It's the idea that we actually like highly competent people more if they make a small mistake or show a minor flaw. Aronson did a study where people listened to a recording of a quiz show contestant. In one version of the recording, the guy is basically perfect. He gets almost every answer right. He's brilliant. In the second version, he's just as brilliant, gets everything right, but at the very end of the recording, you hear him accidentally spill a cup of coffee all over himself.
And people liked the clumsy guy more.
Significantly more. The perfect guy seemed kind of threatening or inhuman. The coffee spill made him relatable. It humanized his competence.
So being a little bit clumsy is actually a good social strategy?
Only if you are already seen as competent. If you are generally seen as incompetent and you spill your coffee, you're just a mess.
Well, noted. So don't spill coffee unless I've already nailed the presentation.
That's the key.
Okay, let's pivot to why this all matters today. This book was first written a while ago, but reading it this week, I felt like it was written about our current digital life.
The principles are timeless. The modern context is just the same psychology on steroids. Think about social media. It is a conformity machine.
The likes, the retweets, the shares.
Those are immediate, quantified metrics of social approval. Normative social influence is now a number you can track in real time. We curate our lives to get those likes. We delete posts that don't perform well. We are constantly shaping our behavior to fit the group norms of our online bubble.
And what about polarization?
That is cognitive dissonance and confirmation bias at a massive scale. The algorithms are designed to feed us information that confirms what we already believe. We rarely encounter information that creates dissonance anymore.
And when we do?
When we see a post from the other side, we don't engage with it intellectually. We screenshot it and mock it with our online tribe. That reduces the dissonance. We don't have to seriously consider their argument if we can first dismiss them as crazy or evil.
And viral misinformation, how does that fit in?
That's pure informational social influence. If a post has 100,000 shares, our brain uses a shortcut. The group knows better. We assume it must be true. We share it without even reading the article. We trust the social metric, not the actual content.
So Aronson's warning about focusing on systems versus individuals is more relevant than ever.
It is the key lesson of the entire book. If we want to fix these problems, the toxicity online, the political divide, we can't just yell at individuals to be better people. We have to look at the system. The platform design is the situation. If the situation, the algorithm, rewards outrage and conformity, that is the behavior you will get.
It's the old saying, don't hate the player, hate the game.
In social psychology terms, yes. Change the environment to change the behavior.
We've covered a massive amount of ground. Let's bring this in for a landing with a summary of the key lessons. If the listener takes away just a few things from The Social Animal, what should they be?
Okay, let's recap the top 4. Number 1, situations shape behavior more powerfully than personality. Never, ever underestimate the power of the room you're in. Don't assume you are immune just because you think you're a nice person. Number 2, awareness is the first defense. You can't turn off these psychological fallacies, but if you know what the foot in the door technique is, you might just spot it when a salesperson uses it on you, and that gives you a choice.
It's like seeing the strings on the puppet. You might still dance, but at least you know you're being moved.
Exactly. Number 3, everyone is vulnerable. Intelligence does not protect you from social influence. In fact, Aronson argues that smart people are often better at creating elaborate rationalizations for their bad decisions. They're better at the self-justification part.
That's a scary thought.
And number 4, the big one. Self-justification is a powerful and dangerous engine. Be deeply wary of your own brain's tendency to rewrite history to make you look good. Being wrong is a part of being human.
That last one is the hardest, I think. Admitting I was wrong can be physically painful sometimes.
It is. It's an attack on our ego. But it is the only way to learn and grow. If you can't admit a mistake, you are doomed to repeat it, all while telling yourself a story about how smart you were.
So we usually end with a final provocative thought for our listeners. We've talked a lot today about how good people can do bad things in bad situations.
Right. So my final challenge to you, the listener, is this. For the next week, stop looking at other people and wondering why they are acting so crazily. Stop analyzing the bad driver or the political enemy. Instead, look at your own environment.
Turn the lens on yourself.
Exactly. What situation are you currently in that might be shaping your behavior in ways you don't realize? Are you in a workplace that subtly encourages cutting corners to meet a deadline? Are you in a social group that thrives on gossip? Are you in an online echo chamber that rewards outrage? You might think you are the master of your fate, but the evidence says you are often just responding to the script that has been provided by your surroundings. The really provocative question is, if you change your environment, who would you become?
That is a lingering thought indeed. Are you the sculptor or are you the clay? Thank you for diving deep with us today into The Social Animal. It's a book that might just change how you see everyone you meet, including the person in the mirror.
Keep questioning.
See you on the next deep dive.